vote against that? We can do our work in the meantime. Just down there.
Are you still on the campaign?
Yeah, I guess I am. I mean, I'm not the treasurer.
I knew the fact that when I stood up here, it'd all be quiet because callers scare people. So, see? So let me say something first personal. As Anne Reiselbach might tell you, if I hadn't become a priest, I would have become an architect. And that's not a joke. I really would have become an architect. That's not the way it worked out. So having all of you here tonight, welcoming all of you, seeing all of you makes me a bit wistful. It didn't turn out that I could be sitting out there with you doing what you do for a living, but I'm doing what I do for a living, and so I'm grateful to be with all of you. So that's the personal thing. The professional thing is, my name is Patrick Malloy. I'm the dean of this cathedral. Dean in Episcopal talk doesn't mean that I arrange the curriculum. It means that I'm the CEO and I'm the chief cleric here. And so on behalf of Matthew Hyde, the Bishop of New York, and all the Episcopalians in the Diocese of New York, welcome to our cathedral. One of the things that we have to do when people ask to come here to have parties like this is we have to ask ourselves whether the event is mission congruent. I can assure you that everyone who asks to come here, not all of those groups are mission congruent, and we have to send some of them away. If you came here to do a tour of this cathedral, and you took what we call the vertical tour, which takes people up one of these Guastavino spiral staircases way up into the upper regions of the cathedral, one of the things the tour guides point out to people is that the level of care that went into carving elements at the very top of the building, that is the same level of care that went into carving elements at ground level, that everything is of the same quality no matter where you are in this building. And they tell people that the reason that it was done that way is because our ancestors and the architects who worked with them, like Ralph Adams Cram, were convinced that this whole building really was for God. It was not for people, and that God sees everything, and therefore the quality had to pervade the entire space. And that's a lovely thing, and it's true. But it sort of, I think, creates a false dichotomy. Because I think, personally, all good architecture is, in our tradition, we would say to the glory of God, but also to the glory of human beings. And that these buildings, like this building, buildings are not simply skins to keep the rain off of people, but they are artifacts that shape people individually and shape people corporately. And so what you do, again, to use our language, is a holy enterprise. And that's why we welcome you here. What you do is mission congruent for us. And we hope that this will be, while it's the first that you've come here, we hope that it will not be the last. So welcome to the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, and welcome to what I hope will be for you a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, Pat, for that warm welcome, and thank you to the Cathedral of St. John the Divine for your hospitality. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Architectural League's 2024 President's Medal Celebration. I'm Mario Gooden, President of the Architectural League, and I'm so happy that we are all here to celebrate our honoree, Martin Puryear. As we all know, our society and the world is in the midst of enormous environmental changes, technological changes, and social reckoning for the liberation of marginalized and oppressed people across our planet. These changes manifest across scales in the ways bodies, space, ecologies, politics, and aesthetics intersect and are entangled. And the design of the built environment is critical to how we confront these changes. The Architectural League recognizes that the design of the built environment is transscalar, interdisciplinary, and can no longer be bound by the old categorical silos of disciplines. The Architectural League has been agile in our ability to adapt, initiate a transformation, and to respond to the world around us through our programming and activities, but also in events like this celebration of the annual President's Medal. Hence, we are here tonight to recognize and celebrate the work of Martin Puryear, which cuts across scales and blurs disciplinary boundaries between art, sculpture, landscape, architecture, and the design of public space. From his groundbreaking installation as the first Black American to represent the United States at the prestigious Sao Paulo Biennale in 1989, in which he won the grand prize, to his Big Bling installation in Madison Square Park in 2017, and more recently to the Nubian vaulting of Lookout, a cul-de-sac in space, as he calls it, which was completed last year at Storm King. So tonight, I welcome you to join us in celebration of Martin, and I invite you to join us in rethinking the meaning of the built environment and our ability to make a more just world. Lastly, let me say just how good you all look, and how great it is to see you and to welcome you all in this magnificent space. Now, I am so pleased to welcome, let's call him tonight's MC, Joe Mizzi, who's one of the event co-chairs along with artist Rashid Johnson, board members Calvin Tsao and Billie Tsien. Joe Mizzi is the president of Siami Construction and serves as board chair of the Bronx Museum of Art. He's also the treasurer of the Architectural League. So please join me in welcoming Joe Mizzi.
Hello, everybody. I'll make it quick. I want to move on and let our speakers speak, and then to allow Mario to return and to present the President's Medal to Martin Puryear. I just want to start by saying it's great to be here. I'm representing the Architectural League in celebration of Martin. I was asked to speak briefly about the Architectural League. It's been around for some time. It's not a museum or a school or a club or a professional association. It's a unique aggregation of intentions, programs, and people. The League was founded in 1881 by a group of young architects who came together to educate and support one another with the goal of improving their work, the field of architecture, and those fields associated with it. Ever since then, the League has worked with the knowledge that imagining, making, and the maintenance of the built environment is truly a collective and interdisciplinary endeavor, extending beyond architects to include others who range from builders to planners to preservationists, landscape architects and landscape designers, and artists. And from our perspective, perhaps no group is more important in that collaborative work than the artists, who both inspire our best work and challenge us to do better. The League Prize, our highest honor, has a long history of celebrating this disciplinarity. It's a mouthful. And we could think of no more deserving recipient than the artist Martin Puryear. I worked in 1998 at the New School on a project with Martin 25 years ago. It's been a pleasure seeing his reputation and stature in the world grow and grow and grow. And I joined the League's board in 2010. I serve as the treasurer, and so it's great to be here speaking at this event. Before the medal is presented by our board president, Mario Gooden, who you just heard from, we are honored to be joined by three speakers that know Martin for years, and they're going to share a bit more about Martin and his incredible work. The first speaker will be Professor Kellie Jones. Kellie is the chair of the Department of African American and African Diaspora Studies and the Hans Hofmann Professor of Modern Art in the Department of Art History and Archaeology at Columbia University. That's a mouthful. Kellie will be followed by Brooke, Kamin, Rapaport, the Artistic Director, and Martin Friedman, Chief Curator at the Madison Square Park Conservancy. Brooke will then be followed by our dear friend Billie Tsien, founding partner of Todd Williams Billie Tsien Architects Planners. Billie was our board president of the Architectural League Board from 2014 to 2018, is a current board member, and one of this evening's co-chairs. We are very grateful that all three speakers have agreed to share their thoughts, so let me not hold this up any longer. We're going to then have the remarks, plenty of time to eat and chat, and then I'll be back later to introduce, at the end of the night, our Executive Director, Jacob Moore, who's going to bring things to a close. So, to kick the night off, please join me in welcoming Kellie Jones to the stage, our first speaker. Kellie?
Okay, I've got to get all the way up here, as always. How's everybody doing this evening? You look fabulous. I'm just so glad to be here for this wonderful celebration. And I'd like to start with some early words of mine about Martin. Most of all, Puryear's pieces elicit a wealth of sensations. They are vaguely familiar but unknown, could possibly function but don't, embody contradiction and dichotomy. And so they also allude finally to the conflict and tension in human existence and are containers for life's fullness and diversity. These comments were part of my curatorial statement as the U.S. Commissioner for the Sao Paulo Biennale in 1989. I was doing so from a small, relatively small alternative space, the Jamaica Arts Center in Queens, and that was made possible by the Fund for U.S. Artists at international festivals and exhibitions, and gathering or an organization, a funding stream that had started a year before and would only go till 2003. But what it allowed was smaller organizations to actually participate in representing their country worldwide. And it was a great opportunity. We showed mostly the Lever series. And of course, Lever 1 is on the cover of my book, I Minded, because I wanted to show to the world what I had shown to the world, and that what Martin had allowed me to show to the world. I also showed some pieces, Rawhide Cone, for Beckworth, and Maroon, slightly earlier pieces, but pieces that have stayed with me as part of my later work as I thought about art in the United States, in the West, and our histories as a country. I was reminded recently about the controversy surrounding our participation, which was that, and Martin and I never really have talked about it since, but we're gonna mention a little bit about it, which was that Brazil at that time, the curatorial triumvirate of the Biennale, was none too pleased that it was somebody they didn't know, either the artist or the curator, and there was some pushback. But we rallied, and in the end, we were victorious because Martin won the grand prize for Best Individual Exhibition. And so there you go. 30 years later, Martin would show at the Venice Biennale, curated by Brooke, Kamin, Rapaport, and who had also worked on our 1989 exhibition, where she first met Martin. So it was wonderful to see that we had been victorious in our thinking, and the world got to see all that Martin was about. He has continued to excite the world with the distillations of human memory and experience, where meaning becomes broad and implication wide. I'm very thankful to Martin for trusting that young girl in the 1980s working in Queens those many years ago. And I want to thank you again, Martin, for the trust you put in me to do that show and the work we were able to do together in a world that wasn't quite ready for us, but we made it ready. So I thank you again, and I now turn it over to Brooke.
It is such an honor to join tonight with Kellie Jones and Billie Tsien to speak about Martin. Thank you to Mario Gooden and to Jacob Moore of the Architectural League for this important occasion. Let's pause for a moment to think intensively about Martin Puryear's work. Through his sculpture, some of it public and in architectural scale, reaching to the sky, some of it private in human scale that burrows into our souls, Martin has asked us to look up and also to look in. His public sculpture beseeches every viewer, all of these eyes and minds, to consider inconsistencies and tragedy and generosity in the human experience. Think of Martin's towering big bling commissioned for Madison Square Park Conservancy and now on view at Mass MoCA, that at 40 feet high demands us to crane our necks skyward and to consider through sinuous form and laminated plywood, social and economic disparity. And remember Martin's that profile at the Getty, a 45-foot high marvel of stainless steel tubes that intertwined a human face and netting and drawing. Or The Creature from Idefjord, a 23-foot tall sculpture made of blocks, commissioned for the public library in Oslo and installed in the entryway plaza. That's a gateway into the library's extensive collections of knowledge. And Martin's Ladder for Booker T. Washington in the Modern Art Museum in Fort Worth, that at 36 feet lifts us to seek eternity for the American educator, orator, and leader who was born into slavery. And while we cast our eyes upward in Martin's work, there is also the call for reflection, to tunnel into histories and politics, identity and democracy, status, inclusion. When Martin made Tabernacle for the U.S. Pavilion at the 2019 Venice Biennale, he created a world within a world. Viewers peered into the work's center through a glass window in this meditation on American gun violence. A column for Sally Hemings also debuted in Venice. We looked closely at this sculpture's cast iron shackle hoisted up onto a pole, and the work's fluted skirt made in tulip poplar wood as Martin's homage to Sally Hemings. And Vessel, an open work structure at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, is a study in interiority. It's a downturned face, it's a bottle, it's a container of knowledge harboring the form of an ampersand constructed in wire and tar. And Martin's most recent work, Lookout at Storm King, lets us physically enter a central core. Martin's images and ideas galvanize the studio and his library of thousands of volumes where he excavates subjects, artists' works, stories of Matthew Henson, the Black Arctic explorer, or Audubon's avian imagery, or Civil War history, or brutal contemporary politics. And in those essential spaces of studio and library and home is life, and that's built with Jean and their daughter Sasha. There is publicness in Martin's architectural scale, and there is an abiding privateness in his human scale work. And where those two spaces align is that both are linked in Martin's vision. And if there's tension between these concepts, it's an exquisite tension that takes us to magnificent heights and that offers every one of us an opportunity to soar. Congratulations to you, Martin, and thank you. And I'm honored to introduce Billie, Jen. Thank you.
Platform. If for 5 seconds we all stopped speaking and the clink of silverware and glasses came to a stop, and we sat in a quiet that felt both full and gentle, we would experience that feeling that comes when we see a work by Martin Puryear. There is a quieting that happens in the presence of his work. Perhaps it is because you can sense his commitment to defining a vision and his commitment to its physical definition, to the making of it. And I think that's why we as architects and designers so respect and admire, and I believe understand his work. We too are committed to a vision and to the making. So we are here to celebrate this person and his work, but what I also want to celebrate, and what is not visible, is the integrity of his practice. We all work in this world where worth is defined by what its value is as a commodity. We are pushed towards speed and newness and effect. Work faster, use AI, surprise me, and then scroll past me. In his studio in upstate New York, Martin works carefully at crafting each piece, sometimes with his assistant, sometimes with a small crew. And I'd like to call out Lara Davis, who worked on the piece at Storm King, who is familiar both with MIT and with mortar. It is not the work of 100 people in a large studio putting out a product. It is daily, diligent, and comes from his heart and his hands. And over time, this body of work has pieces that will mark your soul. Recently, I was asked to write a short essay in response to a piece of Martin's sculpture. I chose a work called On the Tundra. It is stone and relatively small, about 19.5 inches tall. But like so many of Martin's pieces, it feels immovable. It is in the shape of a falcon sitting on a stone outcropping. Once again, there is the silence, the full and gentle quiet surrounding this piece. I wrote that we as architects have always tried to make the stone outcropping. We want to make an architecture that is rooted in its place. But Martin, as an artist, has made the bird, waiting in stillness, but perhaps suddenly to leap into voracious flight. We, as architects and designers, have the stone and can stay rooted. But Martin, as the artist, has the falcon, and he can take flight. Thank you. And I think I am now calling Mario back to the stage.
Thank you so much, Billie, and to Brooke, and to Kellie for your remarkable words and reflections about Martin and Martin's work. Each year during one of our regular meetings, the Architectural League's Board of Directors nominates a candidate to receive the President's Medal. Tonight's recipient, Martin Puryear, I should say was a unanimous decision that seemed so apparent and required virtually no discussion at all. I don't know, I know that so many of you are here tonight, not only because of your long association with the League, but also because of your deep admiration and appreciation of Martin's work. Now, I do not recall exactly when I was first introduced to Martin's work, but it was probably around 1989 when he not only won that grand prize in Sao Paulo, but was also named a recipient of the MacArthur Foundation Award, otherwise known as the Juniors Award. I was in graduate school at the time, but ever since middle school, I would listen to NPR religiously, particularly for the third Tuesday, I believe it was, in September, when the MacArthur Awards were announced. I know that I had become more acquainted with his work when pylons were installed in Battery Park in 1995, and that I ran as soon as possible to MoMA in 2007 for his retrospective there, and eagerly await every gallery exhibition in Chelsea ever since. Martin's work deeply resonates with so many of us, as Billie have said, for its poetry, sharpness of cultural critique, subtlety, craft of space making, and also for its humanity. So at this point, I'd like to call Martin up front to receive the President's Medal, and I will read the citation. Please join me in welcoming Martin Puryear. And the citation reads, over the last 5 decades, Martin Puryear has created a body of work based on abstract organic forms rich with psychological, cultural, and historic references. From his pylons at Battery Park City and his ladder for Booker T. Washington, a work in wood with impractical curving sides and a dramatically narrowing form featured in that 2007-2008 retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art, to his 40-foot-tall Madison Square Park installation Big Bling in 2016, and his representation of the United States at the 2019 Venice Biennale in the complex narratives of Martin Puryear, Liberty, Libertà, which explored issues of democracy, identity, liberty, and entanglement with freedom, moral justice, and responsibility. And now to Look Out, perhaps his most technologically and culturally complex work referencing African construction and the making of shelter. Martin's impact on public space and the public imagination resonates strongly with the League's mission. The way his practice weaves together political, material, and poetic threads to such meaningful effect is a lesson for more carefully observing, reflecting on, and changing the world around us. And now I present the President's Medal to Martin Puryear. So I'd like to ask you if you'd like to say a few words. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone here. Thanks to the Architectural League. This is overwhelming to me. I want to thank the Architectural League for this great honor. I have to tell you that I almost never succeed in writing out remarks beforehand. I've gotten further along in this preparation for this than ever before, but I didn't make it to the end, so please bear with me. It's especially significant that this event is happening under the dome of this magnificent cathedral. It's a Guastavino dome, and that's a significant connection in my life because my most recent work, which you can see in progress in the screen behind you, the work that was completed last fall at the Storm King Art Center in upstate New York, had one of its sources or origins was connected to Guastavino the family of Spanish dome and vault specialists who for a time had built these extraordinary spans in New York, Oyster Bar at Grand Central Station. This dome, which I was told tonight is the largest of their work. I had a book called Guastavino Vaulting in my library for quite a number of years. And it was as inspiration for me to see what was possible with masonry, spanning space. A book that was written by John Oxendorf, who's sitting here tonight. I finally had a chance to meet John Oxendorf, and to truncate the story, the idea that I had, which was really a puzzle, it was an enormous puzzle, an idea I had to make a work out of brick, a material I've never worked with before, and to make a form that I had worked with only in a different material, but to make this work, which to me was so kind of important because it grew out of my experience of a site that Storm King Art Center presented to me, and a magnificent site with an incredible view, and it required me to think from the ground up on a new idea, particularly for this site, specific to this site. And this work was the result. I finally met John Oxendorf after having looked at the examples of work in his book. And through him, I was introduced to, first of all, the possibility that what I wanted to do might be possible using brick structurally rather than as a cosmetic veneer. John teaches engineering at MIT. It turns out that he introduced me to one of his former students, Lara Davis, who was another key person who unlocked the puzzle I had presented to every engineer I worked with, or tried to work with, and every tradesperson. I'm veering way off of my text here, but maybe that's okay. I'm just overwhelmed by the size of this crowd and the importance of this crowd. People I've known or rubbed shoulders with or had contact with over the years, going way, way back. It's so moving. And as a sculptor, I'm reading now, as a sculptor, I must confess to an initial puzzlement at being singled out for such a special attention by a community of architects. As an artist, painters and sculptors, printmakers, who I feel are in a way, have the freedom of children to work without the constraints of function, structure, what Vitruvius called firmness, commodity, and delight, the kind of watchwords of architecture that architects live by. And I think the architects are the adults. And as artists, I think that we have the freedom of children. Of course, it's not so hard, that's not a wall, a firewall between the two, and we're always making inroads into each other's territory. I think about visiting Palladio's villas in Italy and seeing how sculpture was conceived of and used in his time. Figures surmounting the peak on a building, way above the ability to even see the detail. And then you look at what sculptors are doing today, which is, in the public realm at least, sculpture is often thought of as a mediator, a humanizing element between the enormous scale of a building and the people who walk in and out of it, a way to kind of provide some kind of human scale at human level a mediating force. And then you look at architects who've, in my view, have invaded the realm of the sculptor. Look at Frank Gehry, who I think of in a way is as an architect, I think he's a great sculptor. He has the kind of freedom of being able to make a functioning building, but his language is as free as an expressionist, expressionist painter. He's able to do that. Anyway, I'm going afield here. The explanations I've been given for my selection seem reasonable enough and are indeed deeply gratifying. But the question of how I came to be honored this way by these architects hasn't really gone away in my mind. So here are some thoughts of my own. I confess to a long-standing and deep curiosity about architecture. I'm fascinated by the difference between architecture and sculpture. It's more than a question of scale. As a sculptor, I'm more of a constructor than a modeler or a carver, although I do, from time to time, cut away at a block of material. But most of my process involves assembling, making work from elements. In many respects, I could be described as a builder. My thinking is very much about respecting the integrity of constructed objects. Perhaps there's a fascination with the difference between what I do as a sculptor and the work of an architect. Maybe there's a bit of an envy about the way architecture exists in the world. It feels like an inherently more social art. Or maybe it's that at the margins, there's no limit to the scale and social impact of architecture. Some of my work exists in the public realm. Some of my work is intimate and is much more private. But the more public work, I think, does share some of the challenges of architecture. How to give work meaning. How to, in terms of public work, make work that has that firmness, commodity, and delight, those balance. The most recent work I did owes so much to so many people. I mentioned John Oxendorf. Also here is Laura Davis, I don't know how to describe her because she's a crack brick mason. She's an engineer, an MIT-trained architect, and a extraordinary force. My assistant, Rob, I work with a very small studio, one assistant, a person in the office who's not here tonight, Jeannie, but Rob is here with his wife, Marissa. I want to thank my wife, Jean, for coming. And so many friends, surprising number of friends, people I've bumped into years and years ago showing up. This is just so moving. So I think I've run out of the notes I made. But this was such a special honor. Like I said, I think of architects as the adults, and we're the kids who play. And I think that architects play as well. I think that's what great architecture does, and that's what we, I think, give back and forth to one another. So, thank you for this. It's wonderful. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Martin. And now I invite you all to enjoy dinner, and then Joe will be back shortly with the next part of our program. Thank you.
We can vote against that. We can do our work in the meantime. Sit down. Are you still on? No, yeah, I guess I am.
It's 9:53. I've been tasked with getting Jacob here so we can wrap up. First of all, I was asked to report on the Knicks score for any basketball fans. The Knicks are winning 86-64. I was also asked to make sure that everyone puts their attention to the sign-in sheet, the guest book, which is by the bar on the way out. I did want to. We were able to acknowledge all of the co-chairs. I just wanted to mention co-chair Calvin Tsao, who's here with us. Also, former board president and current board member and board president when I joined the board. So thank you, Calvin. I also wanted to acknowledge Rashid Johnson, the artist who is a co-chair tonight. He couldn't be in attendance due to a scheduling conflict last minute, but I wanted to thank Rashid and to acknowledge Rashid. And my main role here is to introduce our executive director, Jacob Moore, but yes? But I just wanted to acknowledge Rosalie Ginevro, our beloved Thank you, Rosalie. And Jacob is going to acknowledge our full board momentarily. But thank you, everyone, for coming. We're going to have Jacob close the evening with his remarks, and we look forward to seeing you all next year. And thank you to everyone, in particular, our honoree, Martin Puryear.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joe. And thank our co-chairs again. I promise I'll be brief. Rashid, Calvin, Billie, and Mario, for all the work that's gone into making tonight a success. This is my first. Rosalie finished last summer, and so this is my first President's Medal as Executive Director of the League. Thanks. And I really couldn't have asked for a better group to show me the ropes than the co-chairs tonight. So I'm really grateful to them. And I'm also really, really grateful to our hosts here at the Cathedral. They have been an incredible team to work with. I think we can all agree what a treat it is to be, especially for people in our line of work, to be in this room in this way. This is not an everyday opportunity, so I'm really grateful to the Very Reverend Patrick Malloy and Ann Moore, but the whole team. There has been a lot of people involved in making this possible, and we're really, really grateful for the opportunity to be here, so thank you to them. I keep kind of forgetting where I am, and then I catch a view, and it's pretty amazing, so trying to soak it up. I also want to thank Brooklyn Winery, Fort Hamilton Distillery, and Ora Casa de las Flores for their generous donations and in-kind services. Yeah. The great performances, Allied Printing and Pentagram teams have all been really wonderful. A special shout out to Britt Cobb and Michael Beirut for all their gorgeous work on the graphic design. And Michael and team at Pentagram are also graphic designers for the cathedral, so you might notice some things around that you also appreciate. The entire league staff has done a heroic amount of work to make tonight feel like no work at all. Especially I want to thank Alicia Botero, Daniel Trophy, and Anne Rieselbach. Yep. And as Joe said, certainly none of this would be possible without the support of the board. They have been so incredibly supportive since I began in September, but for tonight in particular, in all kinds of ways to make tonight smooth as silk. So I'm really, really grateful. I'm also looking at you, Rachel. Special shout out to Rachel Judlow for all the help that she's provided tonight. And then, most importantly, I want to thank all of you and the league community that you represent and in which you form a part. That community is both the reason that we do our work and the reason that we're able to do our work. So we are really so incredibly grateful. And in that spirit, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask each of you to go home and make sure that you are active members of the league, that your membership is up to date, and that you're supporting us at the highest level that you're able. We have many, many exciting things that we're cooking up, including with programs in the next month alone, the next 2 weeks, addressing topics such as accessible streets and the concept of domicide. We're also gathering our student mentorship program, and we're celebrating Urban Omnibus is turning 15 this year. So, yeah. So for all of that, your memberships really form the foundation of the support that make that possible. And we are very happy to report that your memberships can now be recurring automatically. So I encourage you to check out your memberships and make sure that that's the case. And to tell your friends. So actually, most importantly, finally, I want to thank our honoree, Martin Puryear, for his inspiring work and for his willingness and the willingness of Jeannie to let us honor him in this way. It means a lot. So with that, I just remind you to please sign the guest book. I've also been told on your way out, I've also been told that I gather it's a bit of a tradition sometimes that the flowers can be taken from this home. The vases are being saved by the florists, so that can't happen in whole this year. But I was told if you want to take the flowers themselves, you are more than welcome. So I believe that covers us. Please enjoy the rest of your dessert. Enjoy the space. Thank you again for being here. We really appreciate it.